Launchers ready, awaiting final authorization. All systems green, standing by.
Night settles across a quiet radar installation on the eastern frontier of NATO. Inside a dim operations room, glowing screens trace the movement of aircraft thousands of kilometers away. A radar technician leans closer to the display. A formation of long-range bombers has appeared on the edge of detection range, flying from the direction of Russia. Thousands of kilometers east, satellites operated by the United States military track a different movement. Warships from the Navy of China maneuver in tight formations across waters near Taiwan Strait. In the Middle East, missile defense systems quietly scan the sky above Israel, watching for launches that might come from territories influenced by Iran. And in secure cybersecurity centers across Europe and North America, analysts monitor an invisible battlefield, thousands of attempted digital intrusions probing power grids, communication networks, and financial systems. None of these events make global headlines. No declarations of war have been issued, but across military command centers around the world, a single reality is becoming clear. The international system that has shaped global stability for decades is under growing pressure. The balance of power that keeps peace between the world's strongest nations has become increasingly fragile. And in 2026, many strategists believe the world may be entering its most dangerous era since the Cold War. For much of the late 20th century, global stability rested on a tense but predictable rivalry between two superpowers. The Cold War divided the world into competing blocs led by the United States and the Soviet Union. Nuclear deterrence shaped international strategy, while alliances such as NATO and the Warsaw Pact organized military power across continents. But in 1991, that system collapsed with the dissolution of the Soviet Union. For the first time in decades, the world entered an era dominated by a single superpower. The United States possessed unmatched military strength, global alliances, and overwhelming economic influence. American aircraft carriers patrolled every major ocean. Its military bases stretched from Europe to Asia. International institutions, trade systems, and security arrangements increasingly reflected Washington's strategic leadership. For a time, many analysts believed great power conflict had become unlikely. The global economy expanded rapidly. International trade connected continents through vast supply chains. Technology and communication networks accelerated globalization. But beneath this period of apparent stability, deeper changes were quietly reshaping the global balance of power. One of the most important transformations occurred in East Asia. Over the course of 3 decades, China experienced one of the fastest economic expansions in modern history. Industrial growth, massive infrastructure projects, and technological investment transformed the country into the world's second-largest economy. Alongside this economic rise came an equally significant military modernization. The People's Liberation Army began transforming from a large but technologically outdated force into a modern military capable of projecting power far beyond China's borders. Advanced naval shipyards began producing new destroyers, amphibious assault ships, and aircraft carriers at remarkable speed. Hypersonic missile programs, anti-ship ballistic weapons, and long-range surveillance networks became central to Beijing's strategic planning. By the early 2020s, China's military modernization had already begun to reshape security calculations across the Indo-Pacific region. At the same time, another geopolitical shift was unfolding in Eastern Europe. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Many former Soviet-aligned states sought closer political and security ties with Western institutions. Several of these nations eventually joined NATO, expanding the alliance eastward across Europe. Countries such as Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic became NATO members in 1999. In the years that followed, additional states including Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania also joined the alliance. For many governments in Eastern Europe, NATO membership provided security guarantees and closer integration with Western political and economic institutions. But in Russia, the expansion of NATO was increasingly viewed through a different strategic lens. Russian leadership argued that the alliance's growing presence near its borders represented a long-term security challenge. Military planners in Moscow began emphasizing modernization of Russia's armed forces and strengthening the country's nuclear deterrent. These tensions intensified dramatically in 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea following political upheaval in Ukraine. The crisis marked one of the most serious confrontations between Russia and Western nations since the Cold War. Sanctions imposed by the European Union and the United States reshaped economic relations. Military deployments across Eastern Europe increased. NATO forces expanded exercises and rotational deployments along the alliance's eastern flank. Then, in February 2022, the conflict escalated even further with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Russian forces crossed multiple borders into Ukraine in the largest land invasion in Europe since World War II. The war triggered an unprecedented wave of international responses, economic sanctions, military aid packages, and strategic realignments. European nations began increasing defense spending at levels not seen in decades. Countries such as Finland and Sweden, historically known for military neutrality, moved toward joining NATO, further expanding the alliance's reach in Northern Europe. At the same time, the conflict revealed how deeply interconnected modern geopolitics had become. Energy markets shifted rapidly as European states reduced dependence on Russian natural gas. Global food supplies were affected as grain exports from Ukraine faced disruptions. International financial systems adjusted to sweeping sanctions targeting Russian banks and industries. Across the world, governments began reassessing long-term security strategies. Defense budgets increased across Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. New weapons systems, from hypersonic missiles to autonomous drones, moved from experimental programs to operational deployment. Meanwhile, military alliances were quietly strengthening. In the Indo-Pacific, the United States expanded cooperation with regional partners such as Japan, Australia, and South Korea. Joint military exercises increased in frequency and scale. Naval patrols across contested maritime regions intensified. Across multiple continents, a pattern began to emerge. The global system that had once appeared stable was evolving into a far more competitive environment. Major powers were once again preparing for strategic rivalry, not only through military strength, but also through economic influence, technological competition, and geopolitical alliances. And by the mid-2020s, many analysts concluded that the world had entered a new era. An era defined by the return of great power competition. By the middle of the 2020s, the international system was no longer defined by a single dominant power. Instead, the world had entered a period increasingly described by strategists as great power competition, a geopolitical environment where multiple major states possess the economic, military, and technological strength to challenge one another. At the center of this shift stands the growing strategic rivalry between the United States and China. For decades, the relationship between the two nations was shaped primarily by economic cooperation. China became deeply integrated into global trade networks, exporting goods across international markets while importing advanced technologies and investment. But as China's economic and military capabilities expanded, competition began to emerge across multiple domains. In the Indo-Pacific region, this rivalry is increasingly visible in naval deployments, military exercises, and strategic partnerships. The United States maintains a network of alliances stretching from Japan and South Korea to Australia and the Philippines. American naval forces regularly patrol the region, operating aircraft carriers, submarines, and long-range surveillance aircraft across critical sea lanes. China, meanwhile, has undertaken a rapid expansion of its naval capabilities. Shipyards along China's eastern coast now produce advanced destroyers, amphibious assault ships, and new aircraft carriers at a pace that has surprised many military observers. These developments support Beijing's broader objective of securing its maritime approaches and asserting influence in surrounding waters. One of the most strategically important areas affected by this competition is the South China Sea. This vast maritime region contains vital shipping lanes through which a significant portion of global trade flows each year. Several countries, including Vietnam, Malaysia, and the Philippines, maintain territorial claims in parts of the sea. China has also asserted extensive claims over the region and has constructed artificial islands equipped with airstrips, radar systems, and defensive missile installations. These overlapping claims have transformed the South China Sea into one of the most heavily monitored maritime regions in the world. At the same time, new security partnerships have begun forming across the Indo-Pacific. One of the most significant is AUKUS, a defense partnership announced in 2021 between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The agreement includes plans for Australia to acquire nuclear-powered submarines and expand cooperation in advanced military technologies, such as artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, and quantum computing. Another emerging alignment is the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which brings together the United States, India, Japan, and Australia. While not a formal military alliance, the Quad focuses on strategic coordination across areas, including maritime security, supply chains, and emerging technologies. Together, these partnerships reflect a broader effort by several countries to balance China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region. Meanwhile, tensions in Europe continue to reshape the strategic landscape. Following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, military planners in Russia and NATO have increasingly prepared for the possibility of prolonged confrontation. NATO has expanded troop deployments along its eastern flank, while Russia has emphasized modernization of long-range missile forces and nuclear deterrent systems. The war in Ukraine has also revealed how modern conflicts extend far beyond traditional battlefields. Cyber operations have targeted government networks, communication infrastructure, and financial systems. Satellite imagery and commercial space technologies have played a central role in battlefield intelligence. Drones, both reconnaissance and armed variants, have become essential tools for modern military operations. Across the Middle East, regional rivalries continue to add additional layers of complexity to the global security environment. Tensions involving Iran, Israel, and several Gulf states have been shaped by missile development programs, proxy conflicts, and concerns surrounding nuclear capabilities. Armed groups supported by regional powers operate across multiple countries, creating a network of conflicts that can rapidly escalate beyond national borders. These regional dynamics are closely watched by global powers whose interests, from energy markets to security partnerships, are deeply connected to stability in the Middle East. Beyond land, sea, and air, two additional domains are becoming increasingly central to modern geopolitical competition. The first is cyberspace. Government agencies and private companies now defend critical digital infrastructure against sophisticated cyber intrusions. Electrical grids, financial systems, communication networks, and transportation systems all rely on interconnected digital platforms, making them potential targets in times of conflict. The second emerging domain is space. Satellites orbiting Earth provide navigation, weather forecasting, communications, and military surveillance. As reliance on space-based systems grows, several nations have begun developing technologies designed to disrupt or disable adversary satellites during wartime. Taken together, these developments illustrate a profound transformation in the nature of international security. Conflict in the 21st century is no longer confined to traditional battlefields. Instead, it unfolds across a complex web of military alliances, economic competition, technological innovation, and strategic geography. Across multiple regions, from Eastern Europe to the Pacific Ocean, pressure is building simultaneously. And as these pressures grow, analysts increasingly focus on a number of specific regions where tensions are particularly high. Places where a local crisis could quickly draw in major powers. Places known among military planners as global flashpoints. Few places on Earth are watched more closely by military planners than the narrow body of water separating mainland China from Taiwan. The Taiwan Strait is only about 130 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, yet its strategic importance extends far beyond geography. Taiwan sits at the center of the first island chain, a line of territories stretching from Japan through the Philippines that plays a key role in the balance of naval power in the Western Pacific. Beijing considers Taiwan a breakaway province that must eventually be reunified with the mainland. Taiwan, however, operates with its own democratic government, military, and economic system. Over the decades, the island has developed deep trade and security ties with the United States and several regional partners. Military activity around Taiwan has intensified in recent years. Fighter jets from China's People's Liberation Army Air Force regularly fly near Taiwan's air defense identification zone. Naval vessels patrol waters surrounding the island. Large-scale military exercises simulate amphibious landings and missile strikes. At the same time, Taiwan has expanded its defensive capabilities. The island has invested heavily in anti-ship missiles, air defense systems, and mobile coastal defense units designed to complicate any potential invasion attempt. Washington maintains a long-standing policy of supporting Taiwan's defensive capabilities without formally recognizing it as an independent state. American naval patrols regularly pass through nearby waters, reinforcing a regional presence intended to deter escalation. The result is a delicate balance. Any miscalculation, a collision at sea, an intercepted aircraft, or a political crisis could rapidly escalate tensions in a region where multiple military forces operate in close proximity. For strategists studying global security, the Taiwan Strait remains one of the most sensitive pressure points in the modern world. Across the European continent, another geopolitical fault line continues to shape global security calculations. Relations between Russia and NATO have reached their lowest point since the end of the Cold War. The conflict triggered by the Russian invasion of Ukraine has transformed the military landscape of Europe. NATO member states have significantly increased defense spending, expanded troop deployments, and strengthened military coordination along the alliance's eastern frontier. Countries such as Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia now host multinational NATO battle groups designed to deter potential aggression. In response, Russia has reinforced its western military districts and emphasized the role of long-range missile systems and nuclear deterrence in its strategic doctrine. Military aircraft from both sides frequently operate near each other over the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea. Naval patrols, intelligence flights, and military exercises have become routine features of the regional security environment. The risk of escalation does not necessarily come from deliberate decisions to start a war. Instead, many analysts worry about the possibility of an accident, a misinterpreted radar signal, a military aircraft straying into contested airspace, or an unexpected clash between naval vessels. In a region where nuclear-armed states operate sophisticated military forces in close proximity, even a limited incident could quickly grow into a broader crisis. In the Middle East, a long-running rivalry between Iran and Israel continues to shape regional stability. The two nations do not share a direct border, yet their strategic competition spans multiple countries and conflict zones. Israel views Iran's missile development programs and nuclear ambitions as serious security threats. Iranian leaders, meanwhile, strongly oppose Israeli policies and maintain influence through allied groups across the region. These proxy dynamics have created a network of tensions extending through Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. Armed groups in these areas receive varying levels of support from regional powers, often operating in conflicts that intersect with broader geopolitical rivalries. Israel has conducted numerous airstrikes targeting weapons shipments and military infrastructure connected to Iranian-backed forces in Syria. Meanwhile, missile and drone attacks launched by various armed groups have periodically targeted Israeli territory. The risk of escalation lies in the complexity of these interconnected conflicts. A major strike, a miscalculation, or a sudden surge in violence could draw additional regional actors into the confrontation. Given the strategic importance of Middle Eastern energy resources and shipping routes, instability in this region rarely remains confined within national borders. Instead, it has the potential to ripple outward into the global economy and the wider geopolitical system. Stretching across nearly 3.5 million square kilometers, the South China Sea has become one of the most strategically contested regions in the world. Each year, trillions of dollars worth of global trade passes through these waters, linking the economies of East Asia with markets in Europe, the Middle East, and North America. Oil shipments, container vessels, and raw materials all move along sea lanes that have become essential to the global economy. Yet beneath these busy shipping routes lies a complex network of territorial disputes. Several nations, including China, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei, claim islands, reefs, and maritime zones scattered across the sea. Over the past decade, China has dramatically expanded its presence in the region. Dredging ships have transformed small reefs into artificial islands equipped with airstrips, radar stations, missile defenses, and military garrisons. These installations allow aircraft and naval vessels to operate farther from China's mainland coast, strengthening Beijing's ability to monitor and control surrounding waters. Other countries in the region have responded by strengthening maritime patrols and deepening security cooperation with the United States. American naval forces frequently conduct freedom of navigation operations through contested areas, demonstrating Washington's position that international waters must remain open to global shipping. The result is a crowded maritime environment where warships, Coast Guard vessels, and fishing fleets from multiple nations operate within close proximity. For military planners, the concern is not only deliberate confrontation, but the possibility that a minor collision or standoff at sea could trigger a broader diplomatic crisis. Modern geopolitics now includes a battlefield that cannot be seen on maps. Across the world, government agencies and cybersecurity teams monitor a continuous stream of attempted digital intrusions targeting critical infrastructure. Electrical grids, financial systems, telecommunications networks, transportation systems, and hospitals all rely on complex digital platforms. These interconnected systems have become essential to modern society, and therefore attractive targets during geopolitical confrontation. Several major powers, including the United States, China, and Russia, maintain sophisticated cyber capabilities capable of infiltrating networks, disrupting communications, and gathering intelligence. Cyber operations can occur without crossing physical borders. A coordinated digital attack could disrupt power grids, disable satellite communications, or interfere with financial transactions across multiple countries simultaneously. In recent years, cyber incidents have already affected pipelines, government databases, and major corporations around the world. Unlike traditional warfare, cyber conflict often unfolds quietly, with attackers attempting to remain hidden while probing networks for vulnerabilities. Because of this ambiguity, determining responsibility for an attack can be difficult, creating uncertainty about how nations should respond. For strategists, cyber warfare represents one of the most unpredictable dimensions of modern conflict. Flashpoint 6: Artificial Intelligence and Autonomous Weapons. Another rapidly emerging factor in global security is the growing role of artificial intelligence in military systems. Across several major powers, research programs are exploring how machine learning algorithms can enhance surveillance, intelligence analysis, targeting systems, and battlefield coordination. Autonomous drones, capable of identifying and tracking targets with minimal human input, have already begun appearing in modern conflicts. Swarms of small, unmanned aircraft can overwhelm air defenses or conduct reconnaissance across wide areas. Countries including the United States, China, Russia, and Israel are investing heavily in military applications of artificial intelligence. These technologies promise faster decision-making and increased battlefield efficiency, but they also introduce new risks. Automated systems can process information far more rapidly than human commanders. In high-pressure situations, algorithms might interpret signals or movements as hostile actions, potentially triggering responses before diplomatic channels have time to react. For this reason, many international security experts emphasize the importance of maintaining human oversight in critical military decisions. The rise of AI-driven warfare reflects a broader trend shaping modern geopolitics. Competition between major powers is no longer limited to traditional military strength. It increasingly includes technological dominance, from quantum computing and satellite networks to autonomous weapon systems. And as these technologies advance, they may redefine how future conflicts unfold. Across these flashpoints, from the Taiwan Strait to the South China Sea, from Eastern Europe to cyberspace, pressure points continue to accumulate. Each one represents a localized tension. But in a deeply interconnected world, crises rarely remain isolated. The next question confronting global strategists is how the world's major military powers compare in strength, and how that balance of power might influence the course of any future conflict. In the 21st century, global stability is shaped not only by diplomacy and alliances, but also by the distribution of military power. Several nations now possess armed forces capable of influencing events far beyond their own borders. Their capabilities include advanced aircraft, powerful naval fleets, cyber warfare units, and nuclear arsenals capable of deterring large-scale conflict. At the center of this balance stands the military of the United States. For decades, the United States has maintained the most extensive global military network in history. American forces operate hundreds of bases across multiple continents, allowing rapid deployment of troops, aircraft, and naval vessels to regions experiencing instability. One of the most visible elements of U.S. power is its fleet of aircraft carriers. These massive vessels function as mobile air bases, each capable of launching dozens of fighter jets and surveillance aircraft. Carrier strike groups patrol strategic waterways from the Pacific Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea, providing a flexible military presence wherever tensions arise. Beyond conventional forces, the United States maintains a sophisticated network of satellites that support navigation, intelligence gathering, and global communications. These space-based systems allow military planners to monitor troop movements, track missile launches, and coordinate operations across vast distances. At the same time, another major military transformation is underway in Asia. Over the past 2 decades, China has invested heavily in modernizing the People's Liberation Army. Advanced missile systems, stealth aircraft, and long-range naval forces are gradually expanding China's ability to project power across the Indo-Pacific region. Chinese shipyards now produce destroyers, frigates, and amphibious assault ships at an unprecedented rate. New aircraft carriers have joined the fleet, supported by sophisticated anti-ship missile systems designed to deter foreign naval forces from operating near China's coastline. In addition to naval expansion, China has also focused on developing anti-access and area denial strategies, military doctrines designed to limit an adversary's ability to enter or operate within certain regions. Long-range missile systems, radar networks, and coastal defense platforms form part of this layered defensive approach. Meanwhile, in Eastern Europe and across Eurasia, Russia continues to maintain one of the world's most formidable military arsenals. Although Russia's conventional forces are smaller than those of the United States or China, the country retains significant capabilities in strategic missile systems, air defense networks, and armored forces. Russian military doctrine places particular emphasis on long-range precision weapons and nuclear deterrence. Strategic missile units operate intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of delivering nuclear warheads across continents. Submarines equipped with ballistic missiles patrol oceans as part of a second strike capability designed to ensure retaliation even in the event of a surprise attack. These nuclear forces form a central pillar of Russia's national security strategy. Alongside these major powers, the collective military strength of NATO remains one of the most significant defensive alliances in modern history. NATO brings together dozens of member states across North America and Europe, pooling resources and coordinating defense planning through a shared command structure. Member countries contribute advanced aircraft, naval fleets, armored units, and missile defense systems. In recent years, NATO has expanded military exercises and rotational deployments along its eastern frontier, particularly in countries such as Poland and the Baltic states. These deployments are designed to reinforce deterrence and reassure member states located near areas of geopolitical tension. Across all these nations, one common theme is clear. Military technology is evolving rapidly. Hypersonic missiles capable of traveling at speeds exceeding 5 times the speed of sound are being developed by multiple countries. Advanced surveillance satellites can monitor vast regions of the planet in real time. Long-range drones allow reconnaissance missions to be conducted without placing pilots at risk. The balance of power between these military forces does not depend solely on numbers of troops or tanks. It increasingly depends on technological innovation, logistics, intelligence networks, and the ability to coordinate complex operations across multiple domains. And as these capabilities continue to expand, another layer of military competition is emerging, one shaped by the technologies that may define the next generation of warfare. While traditional measures of military strength, armies, fleets, and aircraft still matter, the balance of power in the 21st century is increasingly shaped by advanced technology. Across major military powers, investment is accelerating in systems designed to operate faster, farther, and with greater autonomy than any previous generation of weapons. One of the most discussed developments is the emergence of hypersonic missiles. Unlike traditional ballistic missiles, hypersonic weapons travel through the atmosphere at extremely high speeds while maneuvering unpredictably. Their combination of speed and agility makes them far more difficult for existing missile defense systems to intercept. Several nations are actively developing these capabilities, including the United States, China, and Russia. Military analysts believe these weapons could dramatically reduce the warning time available to decision-makers during crisis. At the same time, unmanned systems are transforming the way modern wars are fought. Drones, both aerial and maritime, are now used for reconnaissance, surveillance, and targeted strikes. In recent conflicts, relatively inexpensive unmanned aircraft have demonstrated the ability to locate and destroy armored vehicles, artillery positions, and supply convoys. Advances in artificial intelligence are making these systems even more capable. Algorithms can help analyze large volumes of battlefield data, identify patterns in satellite imagery, and assist commanders in making faster operational decisions. Countries such as Israel, Turkey, and the United States have already integrated sophisticated drone technologies into their military strategies, while other nations are rapidly expanding similar capabilities. Another domain that has become central to military competition is space. Satellites orbiting Earth provide essential services for both civilian and military operations. Navigation systems guide aircraft and ships across oceans. Communication satellites allow military units to coordinate operations across vast distances. Surveillance satellites capture high-resolution imagery of troop movements and missile deployments. Because of this dependence on space-based systems, several nations are developing technologies designed to disrupt or disable satellites during wartime. These capabilities include electronic jamming systems, cyber operations targeting satellite networks, and specialized anti-satellite missiles capable of striking objects in orbit. The militarization of space represents a significant shift in the nature of strategic competition. In earlier eras, wars were fought primarily on land, sea, and in the air. Today, the battlefield increasingly extends into orbit, where satellites quietly monitor nearly every corner of the planet. Meanwhile, cyber warfare continues to evolve alongside these technological advances. Military planners recognize that modern societies rely on complex digital infrastructure to operate. Power grids, financial institutions, transportation systems, and communication networks are all connected through digital platforms. A successful cyber operation could disrupt these systems without firing a single missile. For this reason, many governments have established specialized cyber commands responsible for defending national networks and conducting digital operations when necessary. The combination of cyber warfare, artificial intelligence, autonomous drones, and space-based technologies reflects a broader transformation in military strategy. Future conflicts may unfold across multiple domains simultaneously, combining conventional combat with digital disruption and technological competition. Yet even as these capabilities expand, one factor continues to dominate strategic thinking: nuclear deterrence. The nuclear arsenals maintained by major powers, particularly the United States, Russia, and increasingly China, remain powerful reminders of the catastrophic consequences that a direct confrontation could bring. These weapons have long served as a deterrent, discouraging major powers from engaging in direct large-scale war with one another. But they also ensure that any crisis involving nuclear-armed states carries risks far beyond the battlefield. The fragile balance that defines global power in 2026 therefore rests on a complex equation, one that combines military strength, technological innovation, and strategic restraint. And if that balance were ever to break, the consequences would extend far beyond the nations directly involved. They would reach into the global economy, international institutions, and the daily lives of billions of people around the world. Modern civilization runs on a complex web of global connections. Energy flows through pipelines and shipping routes. Food moves across continents through global trade networks. Digital transactions pass through financial systems that link markets in New York City, London, Tokyo, and Shanghai within fractions of a second. Because of this deep interdependence, any large-scale geopolitical conflict would extend far beyond the battlefield. One of the most immediate consequences would likely appear in global financial markets. In times of severe geopolitical crisis, investors often react with sudden withdrawals of capital, rapid fluctuations in currency values, and sharp declines in stock markets. Major financial institutions closely monitor geopolitical developments precisely because instability can ripple across international markets within hours. Energy markets are particularly sensitive to conflict. Much of the world's oil and natural gas supply moves through strategically vital regions, such as the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Suez Canal. Disruption to these routes, whether through military conflict, blockades, or sabotage, could rapidly affect fuel supplies across multiple continents. A prolonged disruption would likely drive energy prices sharply higher, placing pressure on industries, transportation systems, and household economies worldwide. Global supply chains would also face serious challenges. Modern manufacturing depends on intricate international networks. Semiconductor components may be designed in the United States, fabricated in Taiwan, assembled in China, and shipped to consumers across Europe and North America. A crisis affecting key production hubs or shipping lanes could disrupt these supply chains, slowing manufacturing and limiting access to critical technologies. The importance of semiconductors illustrates how interconnected the global economy has become. Taiwan alone produces a significant share of the world's advanced microchips, components essential for smartphones, automobiles, artificial intelligence systems, and military equipment. Disruption to semiconductor production would therefore affect industries across the entire global economy. Food supply could also be affected. Regions such as the Black Sea play a major role in global grain exports. Conflicts affecting agricultural production or shipping routes in these areas can reduce the availability of wheat, corn, and other staple foods in international markets. During previous crises, disruptions in grain supplies have already contributed to rising food prices and economic pressure in several parts of the world. Beyond physical supply chains, digital infrastructure represents another potential point of vulnerability. Financial transactions, stock exchanges, logistics systems, and international communications all depend on secure digital networks. A coordinated cyber attack targeting banking systems, energy infrastructure, or telecommunications networks could trigger widespread disruption. Transportation systems might struggle to coordinate shipping schedules. Electronic payments could be interrupted. Even essential services, such as hospitals or emergency response networks, could face operational challenges. Because modern economies rely so heavily on digital connectivity, cyber warfare has the potential to amplify the effects of traditional conflict. In this interconnected environment, the consequences of geopolitical escalation would not remain confined to military fronts. They would ripple outward through markets, supply chains, and critical infrastructure, affecting economies and societies across the globe. And while economic disruption would likely be among the first visible consequences of a major geopolitical crisis, the human impact could prove even more profound. Beyond markets, supply chains, and infrastructure, the most profound consequences of geopolitical escalation would ultimately affect people. Modern conflicts have repeatedly demonstrated how quickly humanitarian crises can develop when large-scale violence disrupts civilian life. The war triggered by the Russian invasion of Ukraine offers a clear example. Within weeks of the invasion, millions of civilians fled their homes, crossing borders into neighboring countries such as Poland, Romania, and Slovakia. International organizations mobilized emergency assistance as refugee flows expanded across Europe. Similar humanitarian pressures could emerge in other regions if major conflicts were to escalate. In the Middle East, prolonged instability has already displaced millions of people over the past decade. Conflicts in Syria, Yemen, and Iraq have demonstrated how quickly infrastructure damage, economic collapse, and security breakdowns can force civilian populations to migrate in search of safety. Large-scale displacement places enormous strain on neighboring countries and humanitarian agencies responsible for providing food, shelter, and medical care. Another risk comes from the possibility of military escalation between nuclear-armed states. Countries including the United States, Russia, China, India, Pakistan, United Kingdom, and France maintain nuclear arsenals. These weapons have historically served as a deterrent, discouraging direct war between major powers. The principle of mutual destruction, the understanding that any nuclear exchange would cause catastrophic losses on all sides, has shaped strategic planning for decades. However, the presence of these weapons also means that crises involving nuclear states must be managed with extreme caution. Military planners often describe nuclear deterrence as a delicate balance. Each nation maintains the ability to respond to an attack, but the ultimate objective is preventing such a scenario from ever occurring. Communication channels, diplomatic engagement, and international agreements play essential roles in maintaining this stability. Even without nuclear escalation, modern warfare could have far-reaching environmental and humanitarian effects. Damage to industrial facilities, energy infrastructure, or chemical storage sites could produce ecological consequences lasting years or even decades. Destruction of transportation networks can disrupt the delivery of medical supplies and humanitarian aid. Cities, where much of the world's population now lives, are particularly vulnerable to infrastructure disruptions. Power outages, water shortages, and damage to communication systems can quickly affect millions of people. Humanitarian organizations, such as the International Committee of the Red Cross and the United Nations, regularly prepare contingency plans for such scenarios, coordinating international relief efforts in areas affected by conflict. Yet even these organizations acknowledge that responding to a large-scale geopolitical crisis involving multiple major powers would present unprecedented challenges. The scale of humanitarian need could exceed anything seen in recent decades. For this reason, much of the international system, from diplomatic institutions to defense alliances, exists not only to manage crises, but to prevent them from reaching that point in the first place. Because the stakes are extraordinarily high, the technologies of modern warfare have become more powerful than at any time in history. The global economy is more interconnected than ever before, and billions of people depend on the stability of systems that link continents together. All of this reinforces a central reality of modern geopolitics. The preservation of global stability depends not only on military strength, but also on careful diplomacy, responsible leadership, and the ability of nations to manage rivalry without allowing it to escalate into catastrophe. The world in 2026 is a place of immense complexity. Across continents, oceans, and cyberspace, the movements of nations, armies, and technologies are watched with painstaking scrutiny. Satellites trace fleets in the Pacific. Radar systems follow aircraft over Eastern Europe. Analysts sift through digital signals from thousands of kilometers away. Every action is measured, every decision weighed against the consequences it might provoke. Yet, despite the sophistication of modern militaries and the reach of global intelligence networks, the balance of power remains fragile. Nuclear weapons, hypersonic missiles, and autonomous systems create both deterrence and peril. A single miscalculation, a misinterpreted signal, or a lapse in communication could escalate tensions beyond control. The stakes are nothing less than the survival of millions and the preservation of global stability. History offers a stark reminder. Past wars began not only with deliberate acts of aggression, but often with small crises that spiraled out of control. In every case, leadership, diplomacy, and restraint determined whether catastrophe was avoided or embraced. Today, the same lessons apply, though the instruments of war have evolved far beyond armies and cannons, extending into the digital, space, and technological realms. Yet there is reason for cautious optimism. Nations continue to engage in diplomacy, alliances maintain communication channels, and global institutions provide forums to manage disputes. Humanity has, time and again, demonstrated the capacity to pause before crossing the threshold of irreversible conflict. In this new era of competition, the challenge is profound: to navigate rivalry without allowing it to ignite global disaster, to balance power with prudence, to recognize that the systems and technologies that enhance security can also magnify risk. The fragile balance of global power is not immutable. It is maintained by vigilance, strategic foresight, and the deliberate choices of leaders around the world. And in 2026, perhaps more than ever, the world stands at a crossroads, with the possibility of either escalation or restraint, of catastrophe or continued peace. The path forward is clear. Avoid the mistakes of the past. Respect the destructive potential of modern warfare. And remember that the true strength of nations lies not only in armies, weapons, or alliances, but in the ability to preserve the fragile fabric of global stability for generations to come.